Hello and welcome to Audible River. I'm Alan Rice, and I am very happy to have with me Jennifer Lugris, an award-winning and internationally published artist whose solo exhibitions include the Verge Center for the Arts in Sacramento, California, Richmond Art Center, Merced College, and Maturango Museum. Her work is owned by several permanent collections, including Meta in San Francisco, California, University of California, Davis, and the Art, Design, and Architecture Museum in Santa Barbara, California. Hello, Jennifer. It's great to see you.
Hi, thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, that's a great start. I love that. You know, hey, you know what I'd like to start with is tell me about how you started as an artist. I mean, was this a childhood thing, or what can you tell me about that?
Ever since I was a small child, I was making art, but also exposed to the art world. So my parents, I grew up in New Jersey, and my parents would regularly take me to museums like MoMA in New York. And I remember when I was about 11 years old, we went to the Brooklyn Museum to see the controversial sensation exhibition. And I remember standing in front of a sculpture by the Chapman brothers of young children that looked about my age that had basically penises and vaginas on their faces, it looked like. And I remember how shocked I felt when I was looking at that, because as a small child, I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to be looking at this. But I also couldn't stop looking. And that piece and how I felt has stayed with me now. I'm about to be 38 years old. So for many, many years. And that's an idea that I bring in or try to bring into my work, is thinking about how do you make work that sits with folks for what's going to be the rest of my life. Like, I'm always going to remember how that piece made me feel. So even though I always made art from a very young age, my mother actually told me when I went to college that I could study anything but art.
Parents will do that.
Yeah. So I ended up studying sociology because I got really interested in social theory and how we think that our choices are individual choices, but they're really affected by society and the society that we're living in. Um, and I ended up working in research, specifically substance abuse prevention, for a while. And at one point, I ended up living in LA. I was always painting here and there, but nothing very serious. And I remember feeling like something was missing in my life. And my roommate at the time, who's an artist, Kat Bing, she told me, she gave me her paintbrushes and she said, Jen, you know that art class down the street that you keep talking about? Why don't you go take that class? And I was like, okay, I'll go do that. After the first class, I sat in my car nearly in tears because I knew for the first time in my life that this is what I was supposed to be doing. I was supposed to be an artist. Um, so from there, I went back to school, started at community college, then ended up doing a post-bac in visual art from UC Berkeley Extension, and then getting my MFA and becoming an artist.
Oh, wow. But, I think that the spirit of the artist was there from the beginning when you as a child saw that piece, and something just lit up in you, didn't it? That you talk about it now. So this is informing the work that you do, the kind of impression that you got immediately in that museum, the way those sculptures spoke to you. I mean, kind of weirdly, but it was so profound the way you described it. Uh,
Yeah. And it's one of those things that I put it like in the back of my subconscious. So when I'm painting, so my work does not have genitalia on it. It's very PG because that's how I like to approach my imagery. But I do try to think about, how do you make an image that is going to sit with someone? I heard this quote once, like making the comfortable uncomfortable. Like, how do you create these artworks that then someone will step in and like see your work, and then it'll follow them for the rest of their life. Like that, to me, if I could do that with a painting, then I feel like I have been successful.
well, I must say that your work, what I've seen of it, is very unique. Um, And
Thank you.
oh yeah, you're welcome. I was really impressed when I came across your work. And what I want, how would you describe? Yeah, we'll start with how you would describe the work that you're doing now.
So I mostly paint multi-panel portraits, and that's because I'm multiracial. So I'm Korean Uruguayan. And growing up at the time, I was the only ethnically mixed person that I knew of. So a lot of times I would get these questions like, wait, you're Hawaiian? I'm like, no, Uruguay. It's a small country by Argentina and Brazil. But how Uruguay and Korea, how does that go together? So I wanted to create that same experience on the canvas. So instead of trying to shove everything onto one canvas, because I feel like that just can't be done given my experience, I paint on multiple canvases, and they're not like traditional diptychs and triptychs where it's obvious where the connections come together. People really need to work to see like, oh, okay, that's an arm that's connected to the hand, and it's also connected to the mother who's breastfeeding her child. So that's kind of the excitement or the pulling in that I want to bring into the piece, because that's how I felt growing up when people would ask me about my different ethnicities. Like, well, how did that come together? How did your parents meet? They would always bring up all these questions.
Yeah, so you're exploring how to explain yourself, but you have a lot of different influences. You want to talk a little bit more? You mentioned some, but a little bit about your parents' background that kind of informs where you're thinking that today.
Sure. So my mother was born in Seoul, Korea, but my grandparents are actually from North Korea. So my grandmother walked south during the war, and my
Wow.
grandfather was in the army, and that's how they both escaped. They met in South Korea after they had escaped. My mother, when I ask her about my grandmother, she says, "Mi madre nunca me dijo nada," which means like my mother never told me anything. Because it seems like the story that was there, it was so traumatic that the family kind of buried it and didn't want to talk about it. So my mother and her family, so she's one of four. She was raised for the first part of her life in Seoul, Korea, but then when she was 12 years old, she went to Argentina. And during that time, there was a military dictatorship. So at the age of 19, her family moved again to New York. So my father was growing up in Uruguay. The same military dictatorship was happening there. He loved rock and roll, but he needed to listen to it in secret because you weren't allowed to grow your hair long. You weren't allowed to listen to Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin. All of that was forbidden. So he literally would go to underground record stores and put headphones on and listen to like these forbidden, the Doors' forbidden new record because it wasn't allowed. So he said he came to New York because of the music. He just wanted to listen to music. So he came to the US with $200 in his pocket. So my mother, because she's the oldest Korean, she was told your siblings can marry whoever they want, but you need to marry a Korean. Well, my mother ended up being the only one not to marry a Korean, lucky for me. And she dated my dad in secret. And when my grandmother found out, she chased him around the house with a pot saying, I'm gonna kill you. So my mom got kicked out of her house, and very lucky for me, she stuck by my dad's side, and I was born. My parents also, they are the American dream. So they both came here as immigrants, opened up a dry cleaning business, paid off all their debt, and retired at the age of 48. Uh,
Amazing.
Amazing. Yes. So I grew up seeing my parents work extremely hard to live out their dream life in the future. So they made all these sacrifices in the present, knowing that it would all pay off in the future. And because I was born in this country, my parents were also undocumented in the beginning. So they didn't get their citizenship way after I was born. So I grew up as an American citizen with college paid for by them, always thinking, well, if my dream is to be an artist and I have like my college paid for, I was born in this country, I have a passport, I have all these things that are going for me, like I have no excuse but to live out my dream because my parents had it so much harder than me and they were able to live their dream. So I need to go out and live my dream. So I want to bring it back to the work and how
Yeah.
that ties into the work as well, because another thing that I paint a lot are plants. Because to me, plants are symbolic of reaching your potential. So you say like you sow
Oh.
seeds for your future. And I also think about how if you're a rose bush, like your potential is in the rose. But if you're a daffodil, your potential's in the daffodil. So each one of us was put here on earth to serve a purpose. And our goal as human beings is to begin to discover that and allow our soul to really shine through and allow us to grow into our fullest potential.
Okay, so plants are an interesting symbol for that because with people, it's not obvious when you look at them, that they're growing because it's an inner thing, and it's something. It's like your intentions and what you believe and your talents that you develop. This is all something of an inner experience. But I love that you're showing plants as symbolic. I mean, evoking that process of growth in that way, right? I like that idea. I love that.
Yeah, and I had an exhibition at Maud Kearns Art Center in Eugene, Oregon recently, and it was about that. It was called In Full Bloom, and thinking about how my life, I feel like I'm blooming, and some of the work that was shown there, that was also shown in the Sacramento show that you saw, is about my role as a mother. So I had um, 3 kids in 4 years. So
That's
I
that's
became a
good.
mother and then I fully embraced motherhood. I love my children. I loved being a mom and it's funny because before I became a mom, I was like, oh, I'm only gonna have 1 kid. But once I became a mom, I was like, no, we gotta have another one and another one. And now I feel like 3 is probably going to be it. But there's a part of me that wishes like we could have 6 if I was younger or something. So I always tell people that. But in that show, I really explained how it wasn't until I became a mother that I really bloomed into a much better version of myself. There's something about the challenges that come to you when you have a child and you're all of a sudden learning how to be more patient, learning how to cook better because you want to give your kids nutritious meals, learning how to prioritize your sleep because your baby might wake up in the middle of the night, so you don't want to go to bed too late. All these things, and learning how to make sacrifices for other people so that they can be happy, and how much happiness that brings you as their caregiver. Really stood out to me in this role. So I talk about that in the show In Full Bloom and have the plants like symbolic of like how I feel like I am blooming right now in this amazing role that I've been gifted. So most of my portraits are actually of my children or of me breastfeeding one of my children. And the portraits, they are of my kids kind of like screaming or crying because it is very challenging to be a mother. And I don't want to lie about that. And I really want to show that. And a lot of times I always tell my friends, like, it's chaos. My house is so chaotic. It's so loud. I have 3 kids and it's wild. But the portraits are also very colorful. They're very bright because I'm very optimistic about it. There's something so magical that has happened to me through this role. And I feel like I'm a million times better. Even my artwork I'm much more productive as an artist. I don't waste time anymore. I had to get rid of a bunch of bad habits. So I really wanted to highlight that because I feel in our society, we tend to talk about kids being so difficult and the burdensome part of it, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about how magical the transformation is when you become a parent and how much it can help you grow and bloom into a much better version of yourself. At least that's what's happened to me, and that's what I hope can happen for parents out there. And I also think about it like a lot. I equate it to climbing like a mountain when you climb a mountain, the person that climbs the mountain never says, "Oh, I was so cold, I was so tired, I didn't like the food that I was eating," because it comes in a little bag and you have to add water to it. They usually say, "I made it to the top and it was awesome." And I think about that with motherhood, like that's how we should be talking about motherhood. Like I'm raising like this next generation, and these kids are incredible human beings. And yes, it's hard. And yes, there are challenges, but it's also very magical. It also brings out this superpower that you never knew you had. So,
I love your voice and your vision about motherhood, and how that it didn't get in the way at all of you being an artist. It is, transformed and informed everything that you're doing as an artist. And also too, I love the way that you talk about how the children bring things out. It's like we have these maybe aspects, talents, or abilities that we don't know we have until we are challenged with the responsibility of another human being. And right.
yes,
Right.
yes, definitely. And for some folks, because I don't think everybody wants to be a parent or needs to be a parent, but I do want to emphasize the challenge part because all of us have some kind of hero's journey that we need to go on. And it's through those challenges that we are going to evolve into better versions of ourselves. So I always say, like, don't avoid the hard. Like, if the hard is going to make you a better person, then go for it.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you kind of an obvious question here, and maybe one that you get and you don't like to answer, and that is like, tell me about the headwinds of patriarchy that you deal with as a woman artist, coming into this field that is, historically dominated by men. We're in a modern age, and we're supposedly getting more liberal and understanding and inclusive, but it's still there, I believe. How would what do you talk? Can you address that in any way?
Oh, I can address that in many ways, actually.
Okay.
So one of the things that I always say, not just as a woman, but as like a Latina Asian, I'm so glad I was born in the mid 80s because I think if I was born, I mean, it's very possible that if I was born any time before that, that my artwork would be ignored because I am a woman, because I am Latina and Asian. So I'm always grateful that I was born when I was born. I remember when I first got pregnant, I would get comments like, "Are you going to paint? Are you going to continue painting?" So there's like the patriarchy aspect. But
Yeah.
for me, I was like, I'm just going to prove these people wrong because, I had doctors that were having babies and I had lawyers that were having babies. And I was like, nobody asked them, "Are you still going to go to court after you have a baby?" Like, of course they're going to keep doing their job. And of course I'm going to keep doing my job as well. Another thing that I would say is like feminism has come a long way. So I just started reading a Gloria Steinem book to kind of bring me back to where we were in the 1970s. And when she's talking about the role of fatherhood and how little fathers participated compared to how much my husband does for us, it just made me so glad again that I was born in 1986 and that I happened to choose an amazing man that is also up with me in the middle of the night, taking care of my babies and doing dishes and cooking and doing all these things that historically would have been only the women doing these things. So yeah, I have a very optimistic view of where we are right now, and I have a lot of gratitude for where we are right now because I regularly think about history and where we were not that long ago. I mean, the 1970s was
Right.
not that long ago, and I compare it to where we are now, and I'm extremely grateful for the opportunities that I have and the life that I have now in comparison to back then, and even the opportunities for exhibiting work. I feel like now um, there's a lot more opportunities than existed back then, which was, pretty much zero back then. So,
Right. So I'm really glad. See, you may not know this, but I'm an old man, and so I relate to the '70s because that's when I was coming of age and starting to do things in the world and all that sort of thing, and to hear you talk about what your husband is doing in your family it really warms my heart because I feel like that me and some of the guys that I know were kind of like early adapters of this whole engaged father thing. but I love the kids. That was another thing with me personally, right? But I think that from a lot of the guys that I grew up with, they just didn't have a role model. They didn't have anybody telling them or giving an example of like what kind of joy it would be to actually get engaged with your children. So it's great to hear you say this. I mean, because I love to hear more and more of this equality in the family. And one of the things I do want to talk about a little bit in your work, because it kind of gets into the psychology of what you're doing. The way that your composition and color comes together is very interesting. How did you put it in the? It was sort of like it's like it looks nice, but there's a little something that's prickly about it. There's a little right. There's joy, but then there's this underlying tension that I feel looking at it, and I getting that you're expressing something from your experience in this.
Yeah, and I think that is, I always say like great art is like an onion. It has many layers.
Yeah.
So parenting, motherhood, as I'm finding, also has many layers. Like it's not just joyous and happy and peaceful all the time. There's a lot of times where I'm stressed out because of something, and then unfortunately I'm bringing that out on my children, and then I'm realizing, oh, that's not the mother that I want to be. So it's this constant self-reflection where I'm thinking like, ooh, I didn't handle that as well as I wanted it. I wanted to handle it, and I really hurt my child. So how can I do it better next time when that happens again next time? And I always joke like God will bring you many opportunities to learn your life lesson of patience. There will be endless opportunities to try to get better. So I think about, when I'm painting these portraits, that tension is expressed in the work, like that being overtired and, just kind of worn out sometimes, and thinking about, okay, but I still have to hold it together because I want to be a better version for my kid. I want them to see me, and happy and glowing, which most days I am, but every once in a while I am going to have a hard day because I'm a human being. So that tension is going to be there. And then there's also the tension of I'm always feeling as a mom a little bit lost. Like how you were saying about having role models. I also feel I do have role models and I'm very grateful, but that village that used to happen where like parents would come to like I always thought motherhood would be me and other moms coming together and our kids are playing and we are discussing like how we're going to do this new parenting thing because our kid is just going through this new phase in life, and what's the best way to like handle that new phase. But I'm finding that seldom exists now. Most of us are parenting alone, and maternity leave was quite lonely for me because I was alone with my baby most of the time when I thought I would be hanging out with these more seasoned moms. So that brings me to, I wrote this book called Supermoms because I really was longing for this community and connection. So I started interviewing moms that I thought either had done, because now they're grandmothers, or were doing an amazing job with their children. And I still read those stories now and pull like strength from it because I'm like, okay, I'm going through something similar right now. Um, and that's available on my website if anyone is interested in that. But that tension, parenting, any kind of challenge that's going to help you grow is going to have that tension. And as I'm making this work, which is very, reflects on my life, I'm pulling out my life and my feelings and what I'm going through and putting it onto the canvas. And that is what people are experiencing when they're seeing it. Like you are getting an autobiography of what I am going through right now.
I love all that. And I'm glad that you brought up your book, Super Moms, because I have a copy and I love it. I've been reading these stories and I've just it's amazing. So, and another thing I got to say, me as a guy, as a man, my whole life, and already said I was old, but I still am like when it comes to understanding women and women's experiences, I am still like in first grade, I think, or maybe kindergarten or preschool. I don't know. It's just still learning, and it's that's one of the reasons I liked your work because I could see something about your experience expressed in the art. Being able to express that visually is amazing. And so, like, I'm wondering if, like, some of the other mothers that you know, if they, look at what they say about your work. I mean, do other people identify with what you're doing?
I had a lot of mothers walk into the art house exhibition that was in Sacramento and say, "Oh, oh yeah, definitely. I get this." I had this either like they were, their children had grown and they're like, "Oh, don't worry, dear, you'll get past this." Or like their children were young and they're like, "Yep, I'm going through this too." So that was very, validating. But also, I think each of us has our own experience. I never write about dads because I don't know what it's like to be a dad. I can only see like my husband and how he is as a dad and the other dads that I see, but I can't come from a first person perspective of that. So each of us is coming into the world with our own experiences. So maybe somebody out there will write a book about super dads because there's so many great dads out there. Or I've thought about interviewing dads as well, but right now, I feel like I want to share my story, and my story is I'm a mother, so I'm tied to the moms. I understand what they're going through. And I can a little bit understand what dads are going through, but not like I can with moms because I'm not a dad. So
I, I, I can understand that too. Being able because I'm learning more and more that I certainly don't know much at all about speaking about anyone else's perspective, and I'm learning that I haven't been completely honest about my own for a long time. So I'm like, it's like
that's interesting.
well, I know that comes. I mean, I don't want to talk about me, but I'm saying that because of what you brought up earlier about the choices that the culture gives us. And so if you're making a multiple choice decision of how you express yourself, it may not be what you really want to say or what you want to do. And I think that's the kind of the point, not that, I'm not confessing to be a dishonest person, but I'm just saying that maybe the honesty wasn't something that I saw as an available option
Mm.
until more recently. And anyway, not to talk about me. Um, but I do at times. Now, so one of the things that you mentioned, I think, in reading about your work, is the fragility of life, and that, just the fact that you mentioned it as something that you think about. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, I am so grateful that I've had this chance to be alive because for a Uruguayan to meet a Korean that learned Spanish living in Argentina, whose mom came from North Korea, whose dad came from North Korea. I mean, what are the chances? Like I once read, like it's like 1 in 100 million or something chances that you would be alive, right? Like like that sperm joined that egg, right? But for me, I was like, it must be like 1 in a trillion because what are the chances globally that all these like all these migrations would happen for my parents to meet in an English class in New York and like my dad to turn around and be like, who's that person that has my accent and is speaking just like me? And it happens to be my mother, who's his exact same age, and she's a Korean woman, but she speaks like Argentinian Spanish. And then for my mom to choose to stay with him even though her entire family was against it for a very long time. I mean, what are the chances? So, I think gratitude is really important. And a lot of times when I'm having a bad day, I'll think about like, but Jen, look at everything that you've had. Look at this opportunity to be alive, to have food on the table. One time I read like think about even the most simple things like what if we didn't have day and night? What if it was always night? And people in Alaska are probably like, I know what that's like.
Oh yeah.
It's like little things like that. But I also use it as like my son is getting older, he's one, but sometimes he gets sick and he needs me and he needs to be in my arms all day. And that gets very tiring as a mom. But I'll think, okay, but this is the last time that he's going to be like this, maybe, because maybe in a month he's going to be walking and he's not going to be a baby. He's going to be considered a toddler now. So I try to always think about my situation and my life and be grateful, like not just because I was able to be born. Another thing that I forgot to mention is we both almost died on the day that I was born. So my mom, when they gave her the epidural, and she's not exactly sure what happened, but she completely she basically went into a coma. So when I had two C-sections as well, and the last one I asked like how would that happen? They said that they might have pointed the needle up instead of down
Oh,
at the time. Yeah, so she went into a coma. They had to rush the C-section so that they could get me out immediately because we were both going to die. And then they stabilized her, and I think she woke up a day later. So it's not just the chance that my mom met my dad, but also the fact that we had this near-death experience on pretty much before my first day of life. So I always feel extremely grateful. And part of that gratitude is also I cannot waste this life. I cannot live what other people want me to live, the life that other people want. That's why I ended up studying art, even though my mom didn't want me to. Now she's my biggest fan. But I think about decisions like that. My family comes first, and I'll always decide things that are going to be helpful for them. But I know for me, being an artist is a close second because it's something that really fills me and brings me joy. It makes me a better parent. It makes me a better wife. It makes me a better friend. It makes me a better everything because it has given me so much joy. So when I think about gratitude, and think about, the fragility of life, the how lucky I am to be alive, I also think, don't waste this life, Jen. Like, don't waste it because this is like you got so lucky to be here. So don't waste it.
wow. You have an amazing perception of your own life. And I have to say that, the story that you told about your parents, I mean, they both sound a little bit rascally, or risk takers, and a little rebellious, that they're going to do their own thing. But they're also responsible, because obviously, they raised you and they had the dry cleaning business and they did really well. But you seem to have maybe inherited some of their traits of being steadfast, straightforward, and doing your own thing, but being responsible too. I love that balance. But I also like how you talk about that being an artist, and if I can paraphrase, is like an essential part of your nature,
Mhm.
and that being able to express that is like nurturing that plant that's growing inside you. That's what's making you a stronger person. A part of it, right? I mean, it's obviously a big part because who we are at the core of our being, what we're trying to express in this life, if that gets suppressed, then we feel like you did before you went to that art class, and
Exactly.
right.
Exactly. I teach as well. And when I'm teaching, I always try to allow students to see that they need to choose things that are going to nurture their souls. Because if you don't, it's just not emotionally, you're not going to feel as good. And I know for some people, like for me, it's very obvious I want to be an artist. I am an artist, and for some people that can change. Like maybe, a few years you're really interested in horses and horseback riding, and that's nurturing your soul. And maybe that changes to then gardening or whatever. But I think like it's really important to listen to yourself and listen to that soul that is calling out to you and telling you and giving you hints like, I want to try this. And of course, don't do anything too risky. You have to be responsible as well. And you have to keep in mind the people who love you and doing what's better for them. But usually you'll find that that thing that fills your cup then allows you to give to other people. So I find when I make art and I'm feeling fulfilled and I'm meeting these goals and I'm excited about my work, then when I'm with my kids, I'm a better mother because I'm feeling good and I'm happy. So I'm bringing that happiness and that joy and that love to them as children as well. So yeah.
That's a powerful message. I mean, it can sound simple on the face of it, but there's so many people that I've known in my life that really needed to know that. And the people that did find it, are just it changed their lives. I mean, and so I really feel that you're fortunate to be so clear about this benefit of expressing yourself and making room for it and adapting it. So tell me a little bit. Okay, can you describe to me a little bit what it's like in your mind when you're dividing up? I mean, are you juggling in your mind, or are you like focusing on this, that, and the other thing, or is it all happening at once? I mean, because you got all these different aspects going on at the same time in your life. You're an artist, you're a mother, you're doing work, and you're doing this, that, and the other.
I've learned now through multiple, and I'm probably still learn this lesson again. I've learned that everything just happens to get done. So sometimes I find myself very stressed out because I'm like, oh my gosh, the laundry, there's so much laundry to be done, and I need to clean this, and I need to buy this for this thing, and I need to get that painting done, and I need to write this up for that book because they're going to publish. But then I've learned now to trust. So I've learned to let go and trust, and I've realized over many years now that things just miraculously get done. So I can spend the whole day worrying about it, or I can just let it go and trust that it's going to get done, and it's going to get done both ways. So I'm learning now to kind of let go and trust and understand. So for me, there's two ways that I work. One is that I have like scheduled things, like, right now we're recording this podcast, and like later today I have to talk to a colleague and go pick up my daughter. So I have like very scheduled things. But then I also have intuitive ways of working where I'll find, like, if I have some free time, I'll be like, okay, what's the thing that I really want to do right now that's going to make me feel good if I get it done? And sometimes that's the laundry, and sometimes that's sneaking an hour in the studio. So that's another thing that I had to learn as a mother. I don't have an 8-hour chunk of time to go paint in the studio. So my goal is 1 hour every day. So just like people do exercise a few days a week, like I try to, mine is more like I have to paint every single day, even if it's just for an hour. And sometimes that hour turns into 2 or 3 because I get very excited and my kids are already sleeping, so I can stay up a little bit later and keep working, or they happen to go to bed earlier, so I have more time. But sometimes it's just an hour. But even with that one little hour, I'm still making progress every day, and that's making me feel better. So hopefully, I hope that answers your question.
It does, and beautifully. I mean, that is exactly what I wanted to know, because I think that, I mean, these are the kind of things I think about, but I'm not sure many people really like, ask these kind of questions or think about. But it's so important to know, how do you balance your life? How do you get this done? And like, so what I'm thinking while you're saying that is that this is a real art. This what. I mean, it is. I mean, and that kind of trust, like when your art is flowing and you just like, you're in the studio, like you say, like, oh, you're really getting going and your kids are asleep, and it's like, oh man, I'm going to paint this, and oh, this feels good, and that color looks good. So it kind of flows. But if you can do that with your whole life, like get in like the studio of life, and you can trust that, hey, I'm just going to do some laundry here, and I got to take care of the kids, I'm going to get in the studio, I got to go to this appointment, but it all flows with the trust that you're talking about. That's a kind of blending and matching and balancing that we do with art, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm riffing here, don't
No,
want to.
and sometimes you're gonna get off balance because that's life. Like, we can never be, no one's perfect 100% of the time, and the balance is gonna get thrown off, and then you just have to kind of tip it back into balance, you
and
know?
and you feel that. I mean, you can tell when it's getting out of balance. So you seem like someone who keeps a pretty good perception about what's going on. Um, I get concerned about people who like have an expectation tape going all the time, and so they, if they're not doing what they think they're supposed to be doing, then they get really worried. Uh, but
Mhm.
what you're saying is like, you've learned that it's just going to get done, because you're going to keep doing stuff. Is that?
Yeah, that's also because I had that tape constantly playing. Like, I was worrying about It's like when you wake up at night and you're worried about what you need to do the next day. Well, me being up at 2 in the morning isn't going to get the thing done that needs to get done the next day because I'm not there yet. So the best thing I could do is just focus on the present and go to sleep. So, and it's a work in progress. I mean, I still have days when that worry tape is going because I have a bit too much going on. Like that's when I know like, okay, I have too much on the list and I have to start learning how to prioritize what's most important. Um, but yeah, I think yeah, it's just being present, I think is really important. And that was something that I really learned when I had a newborn. So when I had my first daughter, because I was a new parent and I had no experience I had never even seen a newborn until I had my own baby. I had seen babies, but I had never seen a fresh newborn baby, like just born, even like 2 months old. I had never seen one. And they require a lot. And when you have never held a newborn or been with a newborn or know what you're doing, um, I just felt so clueless. And I remember, before that, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to wash some dishes, then I'm going to take a shower, and then I'm going to blah, blah, go for a walk or something. But when I had the newborn, because she needed so much of me and she would cry what seemed like all the time, even though looking back, it was just probably me not used to it. And she needed to be fed, constantly fed and rocked to sleep and blah, blah, blah. It taught me like I didn't even know if I was going to take a shower that day. I had to throw all my planning away and really learn how to be present because the only thing that I knew during those days was what was happening at that exact moment. I had no idea. Like sometimes like, oh, maybe she'll nap for an hour. But then I quickly realized like maybe she won't and she'll be up in 15 minutes and then I won't be able to take that shower. So that was really a lesson in being present. I thought I had mastered being present before this, but no, it took my first daughter to really teach me like this is what it means to just focus on the now. And I think for people like me that are very busy, having a to-do list that later reminds me of the things that I have to do so I don't forget. But then, like, when I'm there doing the thing that I'm doing, just being 100% present with that because it won't help me to be worrying about the next thing that needs to be done. Right now, I'm here and I need to focus on this. And then also learning, like, when you do have like free time, learning how to prioritize, okay, what's the thing that's most important? And for some people, creating a list of like least to most important or most to least important. That's helpful. It's really up to you. But overall, I think the thing that can really help or has helped me with that kind of like cog of like anxiety, like, oh my goodness, I have to do this, that, is being present in the moment and getting what needs to be done in that moment done. And then focusing on the next task at hand and being present with that.
Well, you know what? That's kind of like a powerful spiritual message that that a lot of the masters say all the time is like there's nothing else exists but now, and if
True.
right,
Yeah.
this is all you have is this moment. So, but our minds are all over the place. But having the newborn, gave you that opportunity to create that focus to be in the now and learn the power of it. I mean, and the necessity, right?
Yeah, yeah, she kind of forced me into
Yeah.
it unwillingly. I was like, but I want to do these things that I wanted to do. Oh, nope, this is what we're doing today. Okay.
Yeah. Well, hey, Jennifer, I have a question for you. So, where are you at right now in your work? I mean, do you feel like you're kind of cruising with this thing you got going now, or you got ideas of things you want to do in the future? Maybe you want to do different mediums. What's going on in your head about your art? Because I know you're thinking something.
Yeah. Well, I've tried other mediums and I always come back to painting. So maybe one day I'll try ceramics. I definitely want at one point want to learn how to do ceramics because that's the one that I have not tried. So I'm definitely cruising along. I love this series that I'm working on about motherhood. And I love these portraits that I'm working on that are multiple panels. I love the flowers. So in the spring, I took a bunch of pictures of different flowers that I just thought were really interesting to look at, like this tiger lily. So right now I'm painting an abstract version of the tiger lilies that I saw. And I have a show at Blue Line Arts in May. So that's in Roseville, California.
Yeah, May of
And
2025, right? Okay.
Yes, May
all
of
right.
2025. So right now I'm working on a new body of work for that. And it's closely tied to the book. I don't remember the author's name, but it's called Man's Search for Meaning. And it's a survivor of the concentration camps. And he talks about in his book how they took away his clothes, they took away his food, they took away pretty much everything from him, but they couldn't take away his mind. And as long as he was sound in his mind, like he could be he could be anywhere there. And I think that's a really, really powerful, it's a really powerful book and a really powerful message. And a lot of people think that because that's how he thought, that's why he survived the concentration camps. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to title this one Man's Search for Meaning after that book. And I'm painting a bunch of flowers for it because I'm thinking about how we all search for our meaning and how we all are on this journey thinking about how do we build the best life for ourselves, or at least that's what I would hope for people to do, because that's what me and my husband, we're always thinking like how do we build, like when we see opportunities and we know that it's going to be good for our soul. Like we bought 41 acres in the middle of the woods off grid down a 2.5 mile dirt road with a young child as like a vacation weekend home. And, at the time we thought this is crazy. Like this is not a financial investment. We don't know what, but we're like, this is an investment in our future. This is an investment in us because we love the woods and we love being outdoors. And every time we go there, I just feel so grateful that we made that crazy decision. But the search for meaning, the search for your purpose in life comes with taking risks and facing fears and being brave. And that's something that my grandparents taught me. That's something that my parents taught me. That's something that I hope to carry to my children, because as they get older, they're going to realize what they want to be. And there's always going to be some challenges with that. And I really hope that they choose for themselves and they don't choose based on what society is telling them to be. But really, I want them to hone in into who they are and blossom into the person that they were meant to be.
Well, that's amazing. I love having this conversation with you, Jennifer. And then people can find your about you and your work on. You have a website that is jenniferlugris.com, and I'm going to put a link in the program notes so anybody listening can go find that and click on it and see your work. And Jennifer, I've really been thrilled with having this conversation with you today. This has been wonderful to get to know you a little bit and to hear about your work and your thoughts and how your experience is being expressed in your art today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.
Thank you again. And that is all for this episode of Audible River. We greatly appreciate our listeners all over the world and wherever you are on this wonderful planet. We'd love to know what you think about our podcast. Please email us at audibleriverpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.